With center, who I've played the most, his ball speed is really high. Never seen anything like it. You don't see anything like it when you're going through the draw. When you play him, it's almost like things are in 2x speed, and I'm usually pretty good at adjusting to that speed. But um, yeah, it's difficult when a guy's hitting the ball that big, that consistently off of both wings and serving the way he is. So
So I know when you guys hear this, you're thinking, is there anything center's doing that I can copy, that I can work into my own game? So I'm going to give you 7 things you can try, experiment with that center does that might help your forehand, help your ball striking overnight. And we're going to start with the most important, which is that you have to press on the forehand. And when I say press, this is what I mean. During the early part of the swing here, the chest has to prevent the arm from lagging back and force it forward with the trunk. So I want you to look in this area on Yannick Sinner's body. These are the muscles we're talking about, the pectoral muscles in here. They press the humerus, which is this part of the arm here, but they really press the whole arm forward because the whole arm's connected. So they press this apparatus this way. They don't let it lag back this way. So they resist going that way. They force it this way. So watch this area during the early driving and late driving phase of the swing. Here we go. See how they don't let the arm get stuck behind the torso? Watch as he turns, the upper arm comes with the body. And a lot of times what I see from students, but even just from, everyday players, is the arm gets stuck back here. So right here, the chest is not engaged enough. It's not pressing hard enough to counteract the inertia. What I want you to watch with Yannick Sinner is, as he keeps twisting forward, that arm keeps flying around with the trunk. See that? See how that elbow, it's never, ever, ever moving backwards. It is coming flying forward, connected to the trunk, and then, of course, it flies to the stroke at the end. That comes from that early pectoral, early chest engagement through here, preventing that arm from, now it's rolling backwards, to be clear. The arm is rolling backwards, and that's very good. That is the shoulder rotating backwards. However, the arm is not lagging behind the trunk. The chest, the pectoral muscles are not lagging backwards. They are forcing the arm forward through the stroke while the rotation powers it. You've probably been told a lot of times, extend through the shot or give yourself more space or hit the ball in front, all these kind of things. That starts back here. That starts back here when you force that arm forward with the trunk. When you don't let the arm get stuck lagging around, dangling back here, and you force it forward with the trunk, that gives you that extension, that gives you that out in front contact, that gives you that space. In a later section, we're going to talk about his returns and his unbelievably strong intuition over how this final action takes place, to the point where he can literally do this through the ball even while falling over. We'll get to that later. For now, I want to talk about preparing your hand lower. Now, this is a way to make that pressing action feel intuitive and feel more fault tolerant. Sinner strikes the ball here, about probably waist high. He prepares his hand basically at the height that he's going to ultimately strike the ball. Something I see a lot is players feel like they need to take the racket up to the shoulders. They need to do this big gravity-driven loop in the back. And for a lot of players, that is comfortable, but for many, like Yannick Sinner, and perhaps this is you, you'll feel a lot more comfortable not doing that. So if we watch the preparation process here, his shoulders are kind of at his waist, his hands are kind of at his waist. He never really brings the racket up to his shoulders. He just kind of places the racket back at the height he wants it here, basically right where he wants it for contact. And then, boom, waits for the ball and fires through it. And I think a lot of players might be benefited from this more simple swing, harnesses gravity less, of course, but the benefit you get from that is you don't have to worry about kind of like the racket flying up and down and like slapping the ball up and down. And you can have a mental conception of the swing that is a heck of a lot straighter. To you, it might feel like there's a lot less going on. Some players feel restricted like this, but a lot of players feel like, oh, this swing's so simple and I can still generate so much velocity. I would guess Yannick Sinner is one of those players. Now, related to this is number 3. Longer does not mean more power. Yannick's swing is extremely abbreviated. Watch this. So it's like a few frames. Here's prep. Boom. shoulders explosively pull out. Hip is basically straight right here. Pressing action, swing's finished. It's like very few frames. It's boom. It's one quick power explosion. Boom. And boom. And so you don't need long, big, flowery movements in order to generate velocity. And in fact, the reason that these kind of very small, compact swings are so useful is you can generate like 90 or 95% of the same amount of velocity, but with accuracy. Pretty much everybody on the tour could hit this approach shot as hard as Jannik Sinner hits it. Okay, the problem is they miss half of them. It's not a physical ability. Jannik Sinner is not physically, I mean, look at him. He's not that big. He's not physically stronger than all of these other men. But he can choose, he can elect to accelerate this hard without missing half of his approach shots. That's the magic here. So it's not about power. It is about a power control trade-off. And by using this very compact, very abbreviated swing, where the racket is here, boom, quick explosion with the trunk and the hips and the arm, here, and then we're through. Like, that compact motion is what allows you to swing so hard and rip the ball so hard without missing. You could switch up your mental conception if you want to try to unlock what Sinner has going for him here. Longer is not better. What you are looking for is a very compact, very quick, very efficient power pulse. You're looking to feel that from the hips. You're looking to feel that from the trunk. You're looking to feel that from the chest. You're looking for all those big movers in the swing to have a very quick, compact, controllable explosion through a spot in space. So what's one of the best ways to get the power pulse working and get balanced so you can aim it? Double bend athleticism. So if we look at Jannik about to play this ball, we see a bend at the hips, a bend at the knees. As these joint angles here become more straight, you lose activation of the hip muscular, you lose activation of the quad musculature. This double bend, it helps you lower the hand, which we talked about earlier. So as you bend here, the hand gets lower. As you bend the knees, the hand gets lower. So that helps you lower the hand. And it helps all of this muscle engage and get ready to pulse you forward. The other thing it does is it can all engage and make little subconscious balance adjustments so you can actually get this racket to go through this part in space. None of this matters if you don't hit the center of the string bed. So this racket must go through here. This being engaged helps you get that to actually happen. So as we watch Sinner come in here, you're going to notice those bends are active the entire time, still active. The only time those bends straighten is when those muscles are activating for power. So you'll notice that back hip is straight now because that glute fired to create power in the swing, but very quickly during recovery, those bends are going to reassert themselves. So double bend athleticism while you're moving around, while you're prepping to swing, the coiling action, creating that tension which you're going to fire into the stroke, requires those bends. But this relates very directly into our next tip, which is kind of a side bend or a shoulder tilt, whichever one feels more intuitive to you for thinking about it. If you bend here, but you just kind of stand up, that doesn't do anything. We need to maintain this coiled tension as we twist forward, and on a lower ball like this, that side bend in the spine is kind of necessary. So if you look here at the trunk orientation, there's a slight bend through here, and the shoulders are slanted down, right? It's not level shoulders. That hitting shoulder's not right here. If the hitting shoulder were here, we would end up losing all of our tension trying to swing through this spot. The elbow would have to be kind of like leaking down here. The swing gets very army, and it doesn't work nearly as well as what Jannik Sinner is doing. Instead, we have that little bit of a bend through the trunk here, that shoulder tilt here, and that lets this back hip really fire and connect to the trunk and accelerate this whole top portion of the thorax through the swing. I'll play this a couple more times here. So we watch, shoulders are pretty level here. Maybe the back shoulder is a little below the front shoulder. As we twist in, there's that little bit of a bend, that little bit of an angle. And there the shoulders are level again. You see that? So through contact here, we need that little bit of a side bend and that little bit of an angle. Now, if the ball were up here, you wouldn't need that. If the ball were up here chest height, this whole apparatus would naturally fly through the ball. It would connect to everything down here without this little bit of a shoulder tilt, this little bit of a bend. What I see happen to so many players is the swings get super army down here because they can't feel, the bend has already started to unwind. Let me go back a couple frames. They can't feel this. they can't feel how to drive with this shoulder slant. And because they can't feel this, the only way to get the hand down here is to like lower the elbow down here. And then the swing gets super army and wristy and all the fault tolerance goes away. We want to connect our hips, our trunk, the tension through our abdomen, all of this stuff. We want to connect it into the swing. In order to do that, we need to use this anatomical upper body position, so we have to bend the shoulders like this, or bend the spine, bend the side, slant the shoulders like this. Whatever cue you feel gets you into this position where this hitting shoulder is firing through below the non-hitting shoulder, where you're getting this slant, that's what's going to let you connect all this compact power pulsing from the lower body into the upper body, is this slant right here. He's coming through with the hitting shoulder below. A lot of tension, a lot of velocity created when you do this. And then, right around here, the shoulders are level again. So that, that kind of dipping action of the shoulder, of the entire trunk, not the elbow or the hand by itself, but the entire trunk, is really what allows you to swing like this on a lower contact the same way you would at chest height. Now you have another very important lever you can use to help you control all of this velocity you're generating: the left arm. Press the left arm and the left hand back across your chest as you press the right arm through contact. Now, watching center's left arm here, you might think, well, coach, that's not really pressing back across his chest. It's not really crossing his other hand, and that's true. The reason I phrase it this way, press back across the chest, is if we watch his left arm and left hand here. So its first job is leverage at the trunk. So first, that left shoulder is helping the trunk yank out and create that rotational pulse that powers the swing, right? But if we look right here, watch that left hand. Doesn't move, doesn't move, doesn't move, doesn't move. So see how the trunk is continuing to rotate, but the left hand has kind of stopped in space? If your left chest isn't pressing back across, your left arm is just going to fly around with your body. So, if you're stationary, pressing will move your hand. But if you're already in motion, pressing might just hold the hand in place. And this kind of brings me to both of those cues can work depending on what it feels like to you. One player might think, oh, press back across, that gives me so much control. Another player might internalize this as hold the left hand. Hold that left side. Swing into that left side and hold it there. Both of those cues work. It just depends whether you're more feeling the motion or the contractions. I want to go through a few more though, because the whole point of the left arm and the left hand is it gives you leverage and balance. So, you whip it out for leverage on the trunk, and then you press it across to help control exactly where that right side pressing action comes through. And this is something that Jannik Sinner, you'll very rarely see him with that left hand dangling off to his side, because he's doing this quick, compact, explosive swing, and he's always using that left hand for a two-handed pressing. I see how that left hand almost seems to float in the air by his shoulder, because he's actively pressing it back with the right arm here. He's not letting it go around forever, and that gives you more control over where that pressing action comes through the air. So you got all this velocity, you got to control it. Both arms out gives you balance, gives you leverage. Two-handed pressing action in. And I think this is also a big reason he's so unbelievably good at returning, is he's using that left hand on his returns. Sometimes it might not stay here. Sometimes he might yank it out if he needs to move the racket. But his understanding of how to manipulate his contact zone using that two-handed pressing action with the left and the right hand is a big reason he can play in 2x speed. Now, our final step for today is mastery over the contact zone. And this is what I mean when I say that. So if we look at Jannik Sinner here, this is a body serve at, I think this one was 141. Ridiculously fast. And he understands, I know the Wimbledon thing's in a way, but he understands his own forehand well enough that he can fall to his left and create the right kind of a pressing action through this ridiculously challenging spot in space. Okay, that's his follow-through. This is why we don't coach the follow-through, because this was one of the best shots he hit in the whole match. And this is the follow-through. Ready? Okay, so this is why the follow-through is not meant to be coached, because God forbid you're trying to do a follow-through here. You're not going to be able to do this. And secondly, no one would ever coach you to fall over like this on the follow through. So the point is, what he is doing here, the mental process here. First of all, he's got great vision, great peripheral vision to actually know exactly where this ball is going to end up. But the second part of that, you have to know where the ball is. You also have to know where your body is going to be. So his understanding, his intuition is connected to that pressing action that finishes his swing to a degree where he can manipulate it through any point in space that he wants to. Now, you don't see this normally because he uses his feet and he uses his eyes to get in perfect position so he doesn't have to fall to his left. But if he wanted to, he could hit every shot right here and, he wouldn't be nearly as good, but like he could make the balls, and that's what's so impressive. And that's how, other players can't connect with this serve like this because they just don't have like the visceral connection between the end of the swing and the eyes and the feet that Jannik Sinner has, to the point where he can just lean like this and hit the ball in the dead center of his string bed. And, that return, it's a little short, but it's got enough velocity that Shelton can't really do anything with it, and Sinner ends up winning the point. So I want you to watch his left hand, going back to our tip number 6. See how we don't actually ever see it there? The reason we don't ever see it there is this swing is more of just a press. There's a lot less rotation because he's just trying to put racket on ball. The hands almost cross there. And so this is what I mean about like his upper body balance, knowing where his racket comes through, and his left hand usage. He has full control of the point in space where the end of his forehand motion takes place. And so this is something that I work with a lot of people on. I see a whole variety of, knowing where your swing works versus having no idea where your swing works. The same way you need to be able to see the ball crystal clearly, you need to know exactly where your racket is going to be and map that to certain feelings. You need to be able to put your contact motion through every spot in the air in order to be, you're probably not going to successfully return 141 at your body, but in order to be able to play high quality tennis. And Sinner can do that, and all of these kind of adjustments. See how the elbow, normally we see Sinner's elbow way far back, right? We see it like way behind him and he's turning sideways and all this stuff. But his intuition cuts all of that off because the goal, the ultimate goal on the forehand has nothing to do with any of that. The goal on the forehand is put your contact motion through the ball. All of that other stuff is upstream stuff you use to accelerate the same exact contact motion. The reason he intuitively cuts all of that other stuff out here and just puts his elbow like in front of his hip and just presses through the ball with just a very tiny rotation, that is one thing. Just pressing is very difficult. You'll almost always use a tiny rotation to spring load it. But the reason that it's so small like that is because he's returning a 140 mile an hour serve. There is no benefit to rotating back and then explosively rotating in. And this is kind of this is like the entire paradigm of what we teach. It is a contact first, intuition first driven forehand. You build your whole forehand backwards from your ability to do this. And the reason you have to do that is if you build it off of something else, you're building it on a foundation of sand. This right here, the ability to do this is because Jannik Sinner's forehand is built on a foundation of rock or whatever, bedrock, concrete, whatever. Concrete, I guess, is what we use these days. So his forehand is built on a foundation of concrete. That's why he can do this. And you might look at all the upstream stuff, but like those are just bells and whistles compared to this. Now they're extremely important. Like we've talked about for the rest of this, video. All of those things allow him to accelerate so fast in such a small amount of area. But this fundamentally is why his forehand is so good, is he has elite level understanding of his own stroke. And he can do this on command. And that's why he can connect all those other things to it and still hit the ball in the dead center of the string bed, which is why it feels like he's playing in 2x speed and he ends up stealing constant points like this and you're left scratching your head.